Okay, Madam Chair, you're live. We can get started.
Thank you very much, Randy. Well, good morning, everybody. We are now reconvening the Board of Governors meeting that started yesterday. For those in the public and the media watching via YouTube, we also say welcome and good morning. Let's start with a roll call. Sharissa, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Governor Bogle. Representative Briggs.
Here.
Governor Gindelsberger.
Present.
Designee Tara, alternate designee Tara Williams for Secretary Jones.
Here.
Senator Martin.
He's online. Just give him a second to unmute. We can come back to him. He's
All right.
connecting.
Governor Mazur.
Present.
Governor Moskowitz. Designee Tanya Garcia.
Present.
Representative Roy.
Here.
Governor Roberts.
Here.
Senator Schwank.
Present.
Governor Scott.
Here.
Chair Shapiro.
Here.
Governor Skinner.
Here.
Governor Smith.
Here.
Governor Washington.
Here.
Governor Weaver.
Here.
Governor Yeomans.
Here.
Dr. Phillips, faculty liaison.
Here.
And Senator Martin, are you with us now?
He's still having some technical problems, so I'm on for him. We're working with his computer.
All right, thank you. And designee Terry Trago?
And that's me here.
All right, great, thank you. We have a quorum, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So we're going to start the morning with a discussion about system redesign. We want to get a sense of what we've accomplished thus far and look ahead to the priorities for the next several years. We're grateful to everyone who's been working hard to move our universities forward, especially during these extremely challenging times. And I want you all to know that students, faculty, staff, our university presidents, trustees, the chancellor and his team, all have been working together, focused. This board should have great confidence in knowing that so many people from so many different parts of our system are pulling together to really shape a bright future for the state system and for the Commonwealth. We do know that colleges and universities across the country are feeling the effects of the pandemic, fluctuating enrollments, lagging state funding, rising operational costs, and shifts in student demands. This is all well documented in literature and really in the media every single day. This is all the things that we are experiencing as well. And I just want to note that yesterday, Dr. Martin referenced the same in her remarks. We're all feeling the effects of this pandemic, and we're confident, we're optimistic we're going to come out of it because we have really started that hard work. The system redesign framework that has been laid is in place, so we can really start addressing those challenges rather than sort of being behind the eight ball and thinking about how we're going to address those challenges. So I really think we need to feel very proud of that work and that this work continues. So our conversation around system redesign priorities will lead us into the University's Success Committee's discussion and action regarding the state system's appropriations request for the next year. And after that, we'll have a few more items of business before we wrap up around lunchtime. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Dan Greenstein. Dan?
Very much appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. So let me start by, so Randy, if we can go to the go to the next slide. So these are longer than normal remarks, and I don't want any snickering about my remarks being normally very long. But these have PowerPoints as well. So, and there are rumors circulating that I proposed to my wife by PowerPoint, and that is not true. Mr. Smith. So I do want to sort of contextualize the appropriations request in the context of what's happening in Pennsylvania generally with respect to higher education and the role that higher education plays in driving the economy and social mobility in the state. So, so we're going to start then with the broader picture in the state. Then look at system redesign, where we've been, what we've accomplished so far, and then look at sort of the next phase, the next 3 years. And then put the appropriations request and the use of one-time funds, which is an issue held over from July in that broader framework. So Randy, if you go on to the next slide, I want to start with the Pennsylvania. And there's a bunch of data in here, as you can expect. But the takeaway messages are that our future in this Commonwealth is threatened by the fact that there's just a chronic and a structural shortage of skilled labor. There are jobs in the state. There are not enough people who are skilled adequately to fill those jobs. And the pandemic, it's interesting, has sort of shined or a very, very bright light on that problem, but it's structural and underlying pandemic exacerbates it, but it's been there for years. PASHE can be part of the solution in educating people to the level they need to be educated in order to fill those jobs. But that progress, our success in doing that, will require significant additional investment from the state. So those are the takeaways from this part of the presentation. So Randy, if you go ahead to the next couple of slides and one more. So just putting some data underneath the challenge that we face in the state. So 60% of jobs today in the state of Pennsylvania require people in them who have some kind of higher education. And about 51% of the adult population has some kind of higher education. And the longer term impact is if employers can't find the talent that they need in the state, they will move elsewhere. But employers go to where the talent base exists. And the needs are felt across the sectors, right? We often hear about the sort of challenges, particularly in the Southeast and the trades. But if you go to the next slide, Randy, it shows up all over the place. Oops, there we go, one more. Thanks. So, we worked over the last few years with, obviously with data that we have on workforce demand, but also with employers and employer associations across Pennsylvania, and found urgent need in the following sectors: energy, finance and business services, healthcare, advanced manufacture, agribusiness, information technology. Many of these areas are areas into which our graduates routinely go and which our programs naturally lead. And if you look out to 2030, Randy, to the next slide, you'll see that the growth projected for the kind of degrees that the Pennsylvania State System universities offer, master's degrees and bachelor's degrees largely, is considerable. 23%, 15.7% additional master's degrees required by 2030, 8.1% bachelor's degrees. So, in a nutshell, the problem today is severe, right? 50% of our adults have some higher education, but 60% of our jobs require people in them. So we've got a big gap, and it's getting bigger. So we did a little math and asked ourselves, okay, assuming that the Pennsylvania State System universities continues to contribute its portion of credentials to the overall marketplace, how many more would we need to produce to continue to contribute our share to Pennsylvania's need? So we assume that everybody across the sector grows together: privates, community colleges, state relateds, et cetera, all grow together to meet this need. What would our share of that be? 1,200 more masters and 2,000 more bachelors every single year, year on year, to 2030. That's catching up to Pennsylvania employer needs. That's not going beyond, that's catching up, okay? So that's the situation that Pennsylvania is in. This is not a Pennsylvania state system problem. This is a Commonwealth problem. So next slide, there's two ways to address it. It's not, I mean, so we need more people who have a higher level of education. How do we get them? Two ways. You can import them. People can move to Pennsylvania, bringing their credentials with them and fill those jobs. Well, okay, except that in migration to the state, it's not flat, but it's largely flat. And it consists of a large number of people who are coming because there are benefits for retirees in the state. So they're not in the workforce. So they may have the requisite credentials, but they are not using them in the jobs that are available. So importing talent is possible. And there are states that actively seek to fill their talent gap in that way. But Pennsylvania is not one of them. And the migratory patterns don't suggest that it's likely to become that anytime soon. Alternative, and they're not mutually exclusive, you can do both and, is grow talent. We can invest in our own. We educate our citizens to the level that's necessary to keep the lights on in the economy. And to do that, it would require us to do better with historically underserved minority students, with adults, with rural students. It is the students who are currently least well served by higher education across the state. It's a mathematical improbability that we can close our talent gap on the basis of more affluent people who can afford the cost of education. So it means educating more people who have been historically underserved, supplying more non-degree credentials, certificates, credentials that don't take 2 or 4 or even 6 years to complete. And it requires us not pricing our people out of the higher education sector. Affordability is absolutely critical. So I want to go to the next slide, and I want to sort of lean in on that point. If we're going to grow our own talent, we have this talent gap. We're not importing enough people to actually fill it. If we're going to grow our own, we're going to have to expand not just access to, but completion within the higher education sector, and affordability is absolutely critical to that. So some numbers that you're familiar with. If you look at Pennsylvania expenditure in state-owned universities, Pennsylvania state system, and you compare that with other states and their expenditure in state-owned universities, four-year universities, we rank 46th. Not unsurprisingly, again, comparing like with like, public 4 years with public 4 years, we're 9th in the cost to our students. And no surprises, we're 2nd, also high, in the average graduating debt of our students. These data points are linked. As state investment declines, tuition, room, and board fees go up, the number of students graduating with debt also goes up. The level of debt also goes up. But there are other impacts. Again, these are state level impacts, and it's not necessarily a PASHE problem, or you'll see, I believe we were part of the solution. As a consequence of this, we're basically pricing our people out of higher education. So what's happening in the marketplace? Well, so consistently, Pennsylvanians' enrollment in higher education falls further and further behind the national averages. It's too expensive. And so people aren't going. And we're losing more students annually to higher education institutions in other states where they can get a lower price. And not unrelated, over the last decade or so, unemployment rate ranking of Pennsylvania compared to other states has fallen from 24th to 42nd. The jobs are here. The talent isn't here to fill them. So that is the general challenge that we're, as a state, trying to address. And obviously, failure to address that challenge over time has significant impacts on the quality of life in the state of Pennsylvania and on its ability to remain economically competitive nationally, and particularly with surrounding states. So if you go to the next slide, you'd expect me to say this, PASHE can be part of the solution. It's owned by the state. It's directly responsive to the state's most critical needs. It already awards a significant proportion of the credentials that are produced every year, about 1/5 of all bachelor's degrees in this state. Our graduates, as we saw yesterday, at a very high rate, live and work in Pennsylvania, 5 and 10 years out. We offer degrees, as we saw yesterday, that align directly with employment needs. And you could argue that we offer a very quick and efficient path for the state to address its talent gap. We are already owned by the state, subject to significant investment. And so the marginal additional cost of our accelerating our graduation, the number of degrees that we produce, is going to be relatively low compared to other options. And we are, of course, fundamentally redesigning ourselves with this in view. Affordable, career relevant education for all of Pennsylvanians, and I emphasize all of Pennsylvanians, because we have to do better with those historically underserved in order, I mean, whether you come at this, if you come at this from purely from an economic development point of view, and of course we come at it from an equity point of view as well. So let me just draw a line there, because I was going to go into system redesign and how system redesign is really framed to address these broader problems. But I wanted to start with the broader challenge that the state of Pennsylvania faces. And any questions or issues or comments either here or on Zoom?
Okay, any questions or comments at this point?
And Tanya has her hand up.
The other really critical element of all of this is that Pennsylvania set its post-secondary attainment goal. The State Board of Education approved it in 2018. We're in the middle of, we just began the process to update Pennsylvania's master plan for higher education. We have 5 strategic priorities, and they involve, closing equity gaps. They involve increasing credential completion, increasing college affordability, increasing transparency on the value of post-secondary credentials, and importantly, innovating and redesigning post-secondary institutions in Pennsylvania for today's learners. And so I wanted to emphasize that the master plan needs engagement from every single subsector of the post-secondary landscape here in Pennsylvania, from PASHE, from the community colleges, from the state related, from the independent nonprofit colleges and universities. And so it's going to take a concerted effort for all of the post-secondary entities in the Commonwealth to really up their game so that we can reach the attainment goal of 60% by 2025. Thanks.
Thanks, Tanya.
And board members on Zoom, if you want to make a comment or question, you can click the raise hand feature like we normally do.
Otherwise, I will move along. Great. So Randy, to the next, I guess you can skip ahead to 2. So let's look at system redesign generally. And one more, just to remind ourselves of where we've been and where we're going. So 2016 was really the beginning of a long process, which started in an early phase where we're really gathering information before my time, and beginning to position the system and put in place the kind of governance structures that was necessary to drive a pretty significant transformational effort. Phase 2 really beginning in sort of late 2018, really focused on defining where we're going, establishing a whole range of tools that we simply didn't have, again, to drive this kind of transformational work, to identify what our priorities are, and to begin to sort of mobilize to move the ball forward. I have to admit that COVID, of course, came right in the middle of that phase. And so while we had initially launched out on a path which was focused on improving the kind of support that we provide to our students, doing better by the students who are currently enrolled, thinking about moving into new student markets, new student areas, et cetera, while also financially stabilizing the system, addressing some of our financial challenges. The pandemic, coupled with our work on budgeting and greater accountability, sort of emphasized the extreme challenges that we face with respect to financial stabilization, and we focused a lot there. as we're now getting our arms around that set of challenges, moving into this next phase really gives us an opportunity to invest in the kind of growth and expanded student opportunity that we originally launched out to focus on as well. So there's the kind of overall timeline. I want to just reflect for a few minutes on the progress that we've made. And this is really a testimony to the board and the kind of courage of its actions over the past. So if you move to the next slide, Randy, over the last several years, certainly when I got here in 2018, there were a lot of demands being made of the state system. I think there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the way that it was sort of governed and managed. And that was clear to me in numerous initial conversations, obviously with legislators, both sides of the aisle, both chambers and the executive branch, but also internally. And, you know, it was no real significant challenge to sort of identify the major issues and then to begin just ticking through them one after another. So one of the things we heard was that the system and its universities were not adequately accountable to the General Assembly and the people of Pennsylvania through the General Assembly. And so we fundamentally re-engineered the reporting structures so that it is possible today for any member of the community, any member of the public, to know in great detail about who we serve, how well we serve them, at what cost, et cetera, through a whole variety of dashboards, which are available online, through a printed report that we deliver every year to the General Assembly, and a variety of other mechanisms. There was concern about our governance and accountability internally. I heard constantly about building projects or investments or strategic directions that had been made across the system which had not worked out well, and even when there was some concern and skepticism at the time that they were being undertaken. And how could that happen? And we put in place an entire accountability structure so that we could, you can't mitigate against decisions going in the wrong direction or having outcomes that were unanticipated, but at least there's a high degree of accountability now for those decisions in a way that there has never been in the past. We invited the faculty into system governance, and Dr. Phillips's presence here on this board as a liaison testifies to that. He is also the chair of the faculty council, which acts as a kind of I'm going to call it a system-wide Senate, and you'll forgive me, but it does have that function to provide advice at the system level to the chancellor and to the board. So we've taken a number of steps to address these issues. Stabilizing the system financially. I heard constantly how, and it's true, that our revenues were not aligning to our expenditures, that as our enrollments were declining, we were not adjusting our operating costs, and we aggressively attacked that problem. And as we'll see in a future slides, we have been incredibly diligent and made real major progress. You'll remember that Cheney, when 2018 was facing $92 million in debt load. And thanks to obviously action by the governor and to the courage of this board, Cheney's debt load is now eliminated. Cheney has received its accreditation and it's on the path to financial stabilization. We've put our arms around the stabilization of our low enrolled schools, many of them in the West, through very courageous restructuring at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And obviously that's one of the objectives of our integration. We've invested significantly in student affordability, again, because we're concerned about our students, but also because we heard from the community that that is the most important thing, or one of the most important things to them. So what have we done? The board has frozen tuition 3 years in a row, and we've increased student aid. Every single year, we invest $100 million of our operating expenditures into our students in the form of scholarship, $100 million. We have foregone 3 tuition increases, probably worth $60 million. So every single year, we cut ourselves $160 million in operating money in support of our students. And all the while, expanding student opportunity and the impact we have, not just for our students, but for the Commonwealth. We launched an aggressive DEI strategy a year ago. Okay, it's late in coming, but it's here. And as we heard yesterday from Dr. Pearson, it's moving well and forcefully. We're growing our footprint in underserved student markets, people who need our help and who need access to those jobs who we had not historically been serving having greater opportunity, whether they're adult students seeking short-term credentials or undergraduates seeking fully online opportunities that aren't otherwise available affordably in the state from an in-state provider. We have expanded opportunities for community college students recently in revising our transfer policies. All the time while investing in our current traditional students, the high school leavers who make up 90% of the undergraduates that we serve. And we've seen, we've made phenomenal success. President Hawkinson was telling me yesterday that the student retention rates at Kutztown have improved by how much? 6%. And the graduation rates also reflecting that, right? We've seen incredible progress at Shippensburg, where retention of underrepresented minority students has improved year on year. And these are just a small number of examples that I could go through across the system. So we have been tremendously successful, and again, through the board's courageous action, in addressing all of the challenges that were laid out to us with great clarity by both our internal and our external constituencies. So I want to go on to our priorities, 2021, 2024. And it's really in this context. We have kept every single promise that we have made. We have met every single demand that was made of us. And we will continue to do that. But our progress now relies upon a different kind of compact with the state. Public higher education is a partnership. It's a partnership between institutions, in our case, which meet all of the demands that are made of them and are managed effectively in the interest of their students, and the state, which supports those institutions appropriately. So I think, Randy and Madam Chair, do you want me to draw a line there, and just in case there are any questions or comments, and then I'll jump into the priorities.
Yes, that's fine. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair.
There's Sam Smith.
Sam?
Is your mic on, Sam?
I believe so.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Great, thank you.
I'll just get a little closer to it. Sorry. When you make a statement, Chancellor Greenstein, that we've met every, promise, we've fulfilled every promise we made. That's one of those kind of things where you better be ready to back it up with either, financial or whatever the documents are that support it. And I'm not questioning that you have it. I'm just saying that I think you and the Board of Governors, by virtue of you're being the chancellor, need to be able to back that up with more than just the words that you presented to us. And I think it's a good message. And if somebody wants to, given the inherent differences of the people in the House and the Senate, I'm not talking about the difference between the House and the Senate. You and I know that it's a different. But they might have different interpretations of what the promise was, or here are the metrics. It's not pure data analytics that goes on. Some of it's a little subjective, some of it's a little objective. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there that it's great. I think I agree with you. I think that we have. I can absolutely say with honesty that we have made every effort to fulfill everything and reach every goal and do whatever we said we were going to do. I can also see from a legislative perspective that that's arguable, that maybe you didn't quite meet what I thought you meant, but I just want to emphasize that to you. And
No, it's a great point.
we need to back that up.
Yeah.
And and kind of throw the challenge back. Like, okay, what do you want us to do next if that's the case? Fair enough. Change our goal to new year. Fair enough. You know, I'm willing to go with that. But developing credibility is a critical foundational piece to creating a partnership that you're talking about.
No, it's great. It's a great point. And if you can hold on for 6 slides, you'll see some of the data underlying some of the claims. But certainly the ones I've made, we can back up with evidence.
And Representative Briggs.
Thank you. And I mean, that skill is why Sam was the speaker, because I don't share those tacks. But I mean, I think the way I view this is the message is the right message, and a lot of folks in the legislature agree that public higher education is worthy of increased investment. And my concern has always been folks that need convincing may unfortunately keep moving the goalpost or the first line. You know, I'm not a football player, but keep kind of asking for more. But I think the messaging for increased, you know, I think this is where it's leading to, needs to be broader than just from this system. If it is regarding workforce and the shortfalls from, you know, for our employers not being able to find talented workforce, maybe folks like the Chamber of Commerce could partner with us, or large employers, or, you know, should try to build that messaging, because it makes a lot of sense. I think we are taking steps in the right direction. I'm with the speaker that, you know, if we say it's done, you know, we have to prove that it's done. The way message I am, you know, we are setting forth everything that has been asked for us to try to accomplish. So I think this is an exciting message. You definitely have data, and, you know, I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Unless
Can I just offer one more remark before we move on, which is that, look, you know, there are no absolutes. We can always do more. We are continuing to do more. You know, I think we realize that to achieve perfection is at very best a very long-term goal. But I don't think there is any question that in the past 3-4 years, we have absolutely made a turnaround, a pivot in so many ways, in the way that our culture has come around as a board, how we think about governance and take it more seriously, how we hold ourselves and insist on accountability throughout the system, which we have demonstrated in policies that we've passed and actions that we've taken, accountable to students by holding tuition, freezing tuition for the past 3 years, by making very hard choices about aligning revenues with costs, and proceeding with obviously major restructuring to get at the core and the foundation of our financial issues, all at the same time keeping the interests of our students, their accessibility, their success, their ability to be successful on campus, be retained, persist, graduate into good jobs, build relationships, you know, with the legislature and with the governor. I could go on and on. So I think that's the important point. And I think, as Dan said, he's going to show data that speak to the goals we have achieved. And we're setting the stage to say that we need and we want partnership. We have great partnership. We need even more. We've got to go now to the next level. And I think that's what really this stage setting is all about. So Dan, please continue.
Yeah, that's great. And these are all good points. And I want to be, super clear. I think I remember my very first meeting of the board in October 2018 at Indiana, I believe. And, we talked at length at that meeting about putting in place a whole range of enterprise management tools that would allow us to equip ourselves to continuously evolve and move forward. And so all of these, it's not, none of this is a one and done. There's always more to do, but we've equipped ourselves with the leadership and the accountability and the analytics and the great people in, at our universities and the students and faculty and staff, obviously, who are doing the work. And we have all the tools in place, and we're showing through the accomplishments over the last 3 years that we not only have the tools in place, but we're using them effectively. And that we will continue to do that. It's not like, okay, we're going to stop. So let me move on then to the sort of looking forward next 3 years, and obviously developed in close consultation with board members, with presidents, leadership generally. And Randy, if you could pop ahead to the next slide. So really 3 priorities, and these haven't really changed from the very beginning of our system redesign. They're still with us, that we're going to operate sustainably in a manner that demonstrates our stewardship of taxpayer dollars and of the scarce and hard-won dollars that our students contribute towards their education. We're going to expand student opportunities and improve student outcomes, because that's what the state needs us to do, whether through the economic development or an equity lens. And to do this, we need to expand student affordability and ultimately to grow. So let me pick apart each of these goals. I'm going to start with sustainability. It's a measurable goal. We either are or we are not aligning our costs with our revenues. It's pretty clear and this is an ongoing thing because our revenues and costs change over time. So it's a process, right? You're constantly working in order to balance budget, just like any family would do across the state of Pennsylvania. And prospects for implementation are high because this work is entirely within our control. So let me just talk a little bit about how it works, because this is an area, I think, to Governor Smith's question, there's some potential skepticism, which I want to address. So we move on to the next slide. So basically, the board in 2019 put in place a sustainability policy. So what does that policy actually entail? We've been operating it now for 2 years. So what happens is that we review our university's financial situation every single year, and we determine where they are against a bunch of financial metrics, and we identify those that need some support and some help, and they're falling behind in terms of their financial stabilization. And we request those universities submit a plan to the chancellor for approval to demonstrate how they're going to get on track. It's a 2-year window, and we'll reset those goals every 2 years. And the process, of course, is ongoing. And it's driven by, if you go to the next slide, it's driven by real accountabilities, right? Last July, with the board's support, we approved a budget a process going forward. We're going to adjust our allocation formula. So we're moving away from a high subsidy model. It has been a challenge that because we had not been addressing our financial instability, we were in effect taxing universities that were doing on the whole financially better in order to support those that weren't. The sustainability policy has created the framework through which we ensure that all of our universities are operating sustainably. And one financial incentive that we put in place to push it is that we're saying, look, we're just not gonna subsidize folks any longer. So we've addressed those subsidizations by removing 50% of them this year. We'll remove another 25% the following year, 25% the following year. So over a 3-year period, we'll be back to a place where that subsidy model is no longer available to support institutions which aren't acting in a sustainable way. There are other financial incentives. You'll be aware that we have written loans to universities. There's currently some active loans at Mansfield, and we attach aggressive covenants to those loans because they're basically attached to the system reserve, the reserves that would otherwise be assigned to other universities. So we're very careful in how those loans are used and the conditions under which they're let. We also use other policy mechanisms to enforce compliance with our sustainability policy. Last February, I issued a directive to our universities, again permitted under the affordability policy, requiring them to address the problems of low enrolled programs that, have real cost, but don't have enough students in them to justify that cost. Where universities are still struggling to meet their accountability, their sustainability goals, we'll form teams of experts drawn from amongst our presidents, our CFOs, others, to support them. I've just asked the presidents to form visiting committees to help a couple of our universities who are still needing some support in meeting their goals. And ultimately, of course, the board has available to it personnel actions. If it's not satisfied that the direction that sustainability goals are being accomplished, it can remove me, the chancellor, it can remove any of our presidents. So we have the tools in place to drive accountability, and we are using them. And next slide, we're doing it in a planful manner, despite some of the rhetoric that's out there to the contrary. We're being very respectful of academic quality and program breadth. We're, by investing in ways that our students at any university can offer programs elsewhere, integration is one example of that. We're making sure that it's very hard to eliminate the last instantiation of whatever low enrolled program you might be partial to. I always talk about Celtic poetry, right? So, before a university sunsets the last program in, name your subject area, there are opportunities to build demand, student demand for that program across the system that's able to support it. And again, there's been a lot of conversation around student faculty ratios that we're asking our universities to live within. They align with the normal range of our national peers today. We're also being respectful of our faculty and our staff, trying to cushion the impacts that this effort, and it's painful. This is not, and I've said before, it's not super fun, although it is necessary. We'll this fall just executing our third retirement incentive. Retirement incentive is really important for two reasons. One of them is, our staff, and particularly our faculty, skew towards, towards older age, much more so than the national averages, I think. And that gives us, in some ways, an opportunity, respectfully, of our most precious resource, our people, to encourage retirement. And then the vacancies that are created, where you can find a skills match, provide us opportunities to help other faculty or staff whose roles might be at risk to find gainful employment, either within their universities or across other universities. As a consequence of this mechanism, we have significantly reduced our reliance on retrenchments and furloughs, or otherwise known as layoffs in more common parlance. We've negotiated with the Commonwealth to help us support employees whose roles might be impacted by finding positions for them elsewhere in the Commonwealth. So, this is respectful both of academic quality, of program breadth, and also of our people, because that is our most precious resource. And then finally, and Governor Smith, this is a slide I asked us to wait for, it's working. And if we can move to the next one, Randy. So there's we set our goals in 2020 in April. We'll set them again in September to take account of new circumstances, but that's what we've accomplished, right? I said to the General Assembly, I think it was a Senate testimony in 2019, we were going to take 200 to 250 million out of our operational costs. In 5 years, we're down 173 million by June 2022, right? In 2019, our enrollments had declined 20 or 21%, and our faculty headcount 6%. So we're obviously considerably behind. So since then, again, through these means that we've just discussed, we've reduced our faculty headcount by 13%. That's 19%. So we're not quite at that 21% that we set ourselves, but we're getting there. And again, our staff headcount reductions are shown there. And this isn't fun work, but it is responsive to a situation that we have gotten ourselves into. And it's one that threatens our ability to serve our students as well as we need to, and obviously needed to put our arms around it and address it. And we have done that. I mentioned earlier that every year our university's financial circumstances are reviewed, and they're basically evaluated in terms of a bunch of financial indicators. And then they're sort of kind of rated on a scale of 0 to 3, 0 being, you're fine or you seem okay. And then, 3 being, you need a lot of help. And so since we've moved in this direction, 2 of our universities have improved their plan level. Cheney University used to be in level 3 plan because of the financial duress that it was experiencing. It's now in a level 2. Kutztown University has moved from a plan level 2 to a plan level 1, not just because the universities just sort of sat around watching the numbers. It's because of the courageous leadership of President Hawkinson and President Walton, and the support the board was able to offer them by taking really difficult and courageous decisions. Is there more to do? I mean, to Governor Smith, sure, but we're on it. This is no longer something we just did once. It's part of our operational management. This is the normal course of business, and it will continue. So let me move on to the future. And again, I think this is addressing Governor Smith's point. There are certainly continuing headwinds, and they're strong. Flat funding from the General Assembly in 2021-22 had a significant impact. I mentioned earlier that we do everything we possibly can for our students by cutting ourselves basically cutting our operational expenditure about $160 million, or foregoing about $160 million annually. Right? That's and it's worth it. Our students are worth it. They're that good. Their importance to the Commonwealth is that high. But it does add to our budgetary pressure. And as is now well known, Randy, if you go to the next slide, our enrollments in fall, this 2021, this last fall, are significantly down, 5.4%. There's clearly a pandemic effect at work, and we can discuss that, obviously. And that will continue. That will continue to create budgetary pressure. So, Randy, next slide. And as I said before, we'll just continue to navigate as part of our normal course of operations. Right? Here's some of the impacts. Here's some of the actions. With fall 2021 enrollments down, obviously that's going to result in it will have impacts on our education in general revenues, 75% of which are drawn from tuition and fees. And it will also result in losses to our auxiliaries, residence halls, food services, et cetera. The integration projects, obviously the projections that we made in July are weakened by the fact that the enrollment declines are there, and there's certain in some of the schools unmet workforce targets which haven't yet been met, and we will. So what are we doing about it? Just last week, I reinforced the directive that I issued in February 2020, requiring our universities to operate sustainably, asking them to continue to address their low enrolled programs, et cetera. So continuing on that path. I have, as I mentioned earlier, directed a number of schools to specifically address their low enrolled programs and get back to me with a plan how they're going to do that by January 2022. And I will require them to implement that plan under the terms of the sustainability policy that the board courageously passed in 2019. And we will reset our budget targets, not because our enrollments dropped this year, but because we reset our budgetary targets every 2 years, and that will happen in fall. So those are the impacts. Those are some of the actions. It's just an example of the fact that this is now part of standard operating procedure, and it will continue as part of standard operating procedure. And the board has extraordinary authority to drive this through its sustainability policy. If it is dissatisfied with the performance, financial performance of any university or the office of the chancellor, it can take extraordinary steps. And we will continue to do that so long as the board maintains the courageous position that it will deliver on the promises that we made to the people of Pennsylvania. So let me draw a line. That's, and one more slide, and then I'll draw a line in any discussion. So good, we can operate sustainably. We know how, we'll keep doing it. And austerity saves money. Good. It also sacrifices the future of the state. To meet our economic development, our workforce development goals, we have to grow the number of adults who have some form of higher education, not shrink it. At some point, somehow, somewhere, this doesn't need to be a Pennsylvania state system issue, but somewhere, somehow, the General Assembly, employers in the state, the administration, people of the Commonwealth need to figure out how to bend that curve up. Let me draw a line there. And before moving on to the second priorities, just to see if there are any comments, questions, Madam Chair.
Okay. Comments or questions at this point?
Senator Schwenk.
Thank you and good morning and thanks for this overview, Chancellor. So one thing, maybe it's inherent in what you were talking about in prior slides, in terms of the priorities. We're looking at a big overview, but where is student assessment and where does student retention fit into our goals and what we may need to rework as a result of what we've seen in decline in enrollment?
So that's a great question, and it's a great cue up for the second set of priorities. So we did not liaise in advance of this. So the quick answer is it's a very high priority, and thank God and thanks to the General Assembly and the administration, we have one-time funds which will enable us directly to address it. Our universities have been working incredibly hard over the last, several years to improve student outcomes, retention and graduation rates. And of course, a lot of the funding, we'll get to that shortly, that's available in one-time dollars can go directly to our universities to kind of amplify their efforts. But as presidents will tell us, and they're certainly welcome to participate in this, in response to this question, frankly, it's the students that you have are the ones that you really want to keep. It is said that it is less expensive to keep a student than to get a new one to replace them. And so it's extremely important. And that's another reason the reason I called out, Kutztown University and others, many others who are investing significantly in student retention. Because it is, look, it's good for students. I mean, the real reason is because it's good for students, but it's rare and where the right thing to do and the financially sane thing to do are actually the same, and that's true, and certainly in this case.
So just to follow up to that, I talked to Dr. Hawkinson. I'm really encouraged by what he's doing in student retention. But when I remember the conversations that we had when, before we voted on integration, there was a lot of discussion about, you're not going to have as many, course offerings or, subject matter available to students at the different, institutions. And I remember, because I sat in on so many of those forums, that was certainly high among student questions. So I guess I'm asking you, and I'm hoping that we're going to go back to students, maybe a little bit early now, because we're really just embarking on it. They've just got back to campus, but we need to continually take their temperature in terms of, how they're feeling about, what we're doing, how it's working out for them. And then we can course correct as needed, because I think our focus has always been about the students. So I just don't want that to get left off the table in terms of the conversation going forward.
Yeah.
And then I'll just quickly add, that, we've made a significant thrust in diversity, in equity and inclusion, and where that fits into how we will meet our goals, I think is critically important. You've said that, through the past couple of meetings, but it needs to come out in any report.
Yep. No
matter who the audience is.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. And that will, I'm not, I'm literally staring at the next slide. So, no. So I'm going to come back to these points more fully. I promise you. And Representative Briggs.
Thank you, Chancellor. I just want to, I think I got it right. We can't let them move the goalposts. I think I messed up the goalpost line. But when you mentioned during the conversation about, the February 2019 Senate appropriations hearing, whenever you had those conversations about what your objections were, I think when you present at the next quarterly or the next opportunity, that needs to be very clear, similar to your other slides, because I know you like PowerPoints, the date and the commitment, and then the action.
Yeah.
Because if I'm with the speaker, if we say we responded to all the whatever and we accomplished, people are going to remember what they want to remember.
Yeah.
And my concern, since I've been elected for 2008, it's been a while now, is that there's been there hasn't been a value to public education from many in the legislature. And my concern has been that this is just another attempt to just keep that number going down. Eventually, you have less students, you need less money. I mean, I do have valid, I have real concerns that this is by design. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that enough members, it doesn't have to be unanimous, enough members of the General Assembly will come together to support a real investment, because it can't get any worse, and we can't do anything else. Any other steps I fear will be detrimental, and we have to. This is the year. We have $1 billion in the rainy day fund. We have federal dollars. This is a perfect opportunity to really move on our commitment. So I just wanted to repeat myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more hands in the room or on Zoom, Madam Chair.
All right.
So-
Okay.
I'm going to move on to the next section, if that's all right, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And actually, Representative Briggs, let me just say, the reason I wanted to start with the Pennsylvania context is because it's a policy decision about whether to move the goalpost. Who suffers? It's our students, obviously, but Pennsylvania suffers. Unless there's an alternative, that gap is not getting smaller. And I don't need to tell those assembled what employers do when they don't have the talent that they need to manage their affairs in this state. Where did Amazon go? So let me go to sort of expanding student opportunities and improve student outcomes, Senator. So directly responsive to your question. So here are measurable goals. And we've already made progress, I think, to the point against some of these, many of these. And here, and I'll go through them in a minute and just emphasize a handful. The prospects for implementation is high, thanks to the support of the General Assembly. One-time funds allows us to accelerate effort in all of these areas. Absent the continuation of that one-time funding, it's low. So let me talk about a few particularly important goals. We've spoken at great length about improving pipelines, community college and high school students in particular. Great for students. It's also incredibly efficient for the state because of their investment in schools and community colleges. And so leveraging that investment by ensuring that there are good pipelines into the kinds of degrees and credentials that are offered at our universities is good for students, and it's an efficiency for the state. And we have taken steps already in these regards very aggressively. I think it was July that we amended our transfer policy to basically require admissions of a transfer student with junior standing, provided they had an AA or an AS degree. A number of presidents from our universities are convening with presidents from the community colleges to come up with a broader list of actions that can ensure, because I think what we know from the research nationally is that having those policies is important, but it's actually the work on the ground that really makes them work. And so our presidents from both university and community colleges are getting together to figure out what that looks like. So I'm excited about that. Obviously, to the senator's point earlier, we mentioned that student retention and graduation rates. We've been making significant strides in these areas for some time now. That's obviously also continues to be important, even more so now. We've talked about our DEI goals. The work that Dr. Pearson reported on yesterday about focusing on making our campuses more inclusive environments is absolutely critical to retaining students. Why would I stay at a university where I don't feel welcome? Again, the right thing to do. Good for the state, good for our students. And there are other things that we've spoken about in ensuring we expand into non-degree credentials in areas that leverage our core competencies. And there's been a lot of discussion about, Pennsylvania State universities going out and competing with, other sectors. And it's not true. We're strong in certain areas, healthcare, business, and STEM, where there's high demand for credentials that are appropriate for a four-year institution to deliver. Obviously, the university integrations, again, to the point that was raised earlier, is all about expanding student opportunity. I'm recalling that the Northeast integration is investing $500,000 in the development of a new student success center. It's additional to the investment that's already flowing into student support. So, Randy, if you go on to the next slide, and this is important, we spent a lot of time thinking, because there's a lot of things we could do to expand student opportunity and improve student outcomes. So why these? Why did we come up with this list? Well, they align with, this is where our universities themselves are going. Something that we see, our budget process that we took so much time to redo so that we could get good and accurate budget projections and have a really better understanding of where at any one time we were financially, also provide us an opportunity for our universities to tell us where their strategic opportunities lie, where they're investing, where their priorities are. And so we've spent a great deal of time. So rather than just plucking out, hey, here's a good student-centered or student-focused initiative out of midair, we grounded it in strategies that are already underway and being funded by our universities. So that's important, aligning our priorities at the system level with what's actually happening on the ground, engaging our presidents and their leadership teams and our faculty council and helping us get an understanding of what those priorities are. And as 3 years ago, when we were very responsive to what we were hearing about where the system needed to improve, we've spent a great deal of time listening to all of our stakeholders, not just in our universities, but our legislators, our business communities, our regions. What do they need? Where are their priorities? And thirdly, we've asked ourselves, where does it make sense to work as a system? Because it doesn't make sense to work as a system in all areas. And we've certainly learned a lot about that over the last several years. And we've also identified, areas where the use of one-time dollar can act as an accelerant. And so we're very grateful. We have a one-time opportunity to leverage the $300 million that's available in one-time funds over 4 years based on a commitment from the General Assembly for $200 million over 3 years, plus our use of the dollars thrown off by the investment and prepayment of our CSRS obligations. Our success and we will deliver on these promises. Our success in doing that does require our access to those one-time funds. So let me just go through, because it came up in the July meeting and people were asking, how are the one-time dollars going to be used? So let me just insinuate that here if I can. So Randy, if you go to the next slide, and then I'll just do a quick overview there and then pause. So this is pretty much the pie chart that you saw in July. There's been, just in interest of transparency, infrastructure has declined because to reflect our investment in a single student information system as expected for this year. And our investment in student success initiatives has grown proportionally. So it's slightly different from what you saw last July, but not significantly. And so just running around the wheel, $18.5 million being invested to drive and accelerate those kinds of initiatives, $3.25 invested into diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We're still working through prioritizing what that looks like. Another $4 into workforce aligned programming, working still on prioritizing where exactly are the benefits likely to accrue, and we'll be reporting back to the board at its next meeting in more detail about those two ideas. Debt relief, we've talked about. Essential infrastructure is the single student information system, which will allow students at any one university to take courses elsewhere, which is absolutely essential to our managing to our revenues in a way that doesn't damage academic program availability to any region. Obviously, we've talked about supporting transition to sustainable operations. We're using funds to smooth the allocation to basically ramp us out of a high subsidy allocation model, and also to support our continued efforts to right size our employee base. And then $15 million towards the startup of our integrated universities in this year. So there's the distribution of the $75 million in one-time funds. That's 50 that has been committed by has been provided by the General Assembly, and 25 that is available through our prepayment of the pension obligation bond. I'll go through two more slides on this topic and then pause. So if you go to the next slide, that basically shows how the different accounts are being charged for what. And you'll see those categories of expenditure that you saw on the pie chart are on the left. The SERS funding that results from the prepayment of our pension obligation to SERS, the federal funding, which is the $50 million committed by the General Assembly. Off the top, I just want to hum a few bars about that. So off the top funding is approved by the board annually. It supports the functions that are fulfilled at the Chancellor's office. Again, because we believe in things like efficient operations, we managed to save over $1 million. That funding is going to be distributed in consultation with the president, really to incentivize the kind of changes that we want to see happen elsewhere across the system. So $625,000 to IUP, really for an investment in its next generation strategy, which is super exciting. $225,000 to Kutztown, because Kutztown has really shown how it can incrementally attack all of these problems simultaneously and turn them into opportunities. So addressing its financial challenges while at the same time investing in its student progress. And so obviously incentivizing that work. And then $225,000 to East Stroudsburg University, largely for its work in innovative work, really in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also recognizing the fact that East Stroudsburg University has been a net contributor in our cross-subsidization, and itself over the last year or so has run into some headwinds, and is really an acknowledgement of their strength in the system, the work that's going on there. By comparison to overall budgets, it's relatively small. I wish we had bigger dollars to use to invest in all the great work that's going on across our system, but I just wanted to call that out. And then finally, just a drill down into the use of one-time student success funds. That was the $18.5 million. And again, this goes directly to the senator's point. This will be used in student recruitment, progression, another way of thinking about retention, and student affordability. And just so we know how we did that. So this was the general area we all wanted to invest significantly in. So, the way we've learned to work as a system is that things work best where they really leverage activity that's already prioritized and going on at the campus level. So we worked very closely with our presidents and said, what are your priorities? What are you investing in? And then how can using this $18.5 million leverage what you're already doing? Tell us what that looks like. And then for the money that would flow from the federal funds, what are the kind of outcomes you're expecting? What would you expect to see? So it really, within an agreed upon general area, student success defined as student recruitment, student progression, and student affordability, what can you do and what can you expect to get out of it with the funds that you would be allocated? So that's pretty much how that distribution is going to work. So let me draw a line there before moving into priority area 3. See if there's any comments or questions.
Questions or comments? Dan, on a slide 1 or 2 back, I think it was important that you noted the relationship between DEI and improving student outcomes. DEI does not exist in a vacuum. We're doing, it's very much related to our ability to recruit, retain, and graduate our students. So, I just wanted to make that point. In the pie chart, it was shown separately, but then it's shown separately there, but you did, show it under the umbrella, student success in a later slide. So
Yeah.
I just want to note that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great call out. Thank you.
And there are no hands in the room and none on Zoom.
All right, let's move on to priority number 3, which is student affordability. And I'm going to come back to growth because that gap, that's the Pennsylvania problem. And again, it's a policy question. The state system doesn't need to be a part of that solution. But that solution needs to be found. And the Pennsylvania state system has a proven track record of delivering, as we saw yesterday, graduates who roll into good jobs, of acting as an engine of economic development, and extensively as a driver of social mobility and equity. So measurable goals, again, pretty straightforward. Net student cost, that's the price that students pay for their full year of attendance, tuition fees, room and board, et cetera, goes down relative to other universities and colleges. You could argue that student costs should always stay within the prevailing rate of inflation. And one expects to see enrollment and credentialing productivity grow. There is good and pretty extensive research into the relationship between cost and outcome. And we've built the analytical model, which we'll be presenting later, on the basis of that research. So ensuring that education is affordable for students is essential for Pennsylvania to meet its workforce goals, because it can't reach those goals on the back of the affluent students who would be required to pay the costs of education today. And I'm saying this as the chancellor of the Pennsylvania state system, which is the most affordable in the state, and yet increasingly becoming out of reach to so many students and their families. Next slide. So our prospects for achieving this is, go back one, I'm sorry, Randy. Our prospects for achieving this is high, but not without recurrent state funding. We cannot do any more of this on our own. And let me just a word about why in the next slide. So, I mentioned before that we cut ourselves $160 million a year in our operating expenditure in order to support our students. As we become more efficient, we talked about sustainability, there's less to cut, nothing left. So there's little more that we can do to support our students. And we can't continue to sustain flat tuition. And just to give you a sense of the scale of the problem, if we were to invest in our students just to meet the average investment that's made in the 5 contiguous states surrounding Pennsylvania, it would cost us $300 million a year. $300 million a year, simply to hit the regional average. I was asked yesterday about, whether we could do reciprocal agreements with students from other states. We can, and I think some of our universities do, but we have to be cost competitive to be able to do that. So let me draw a line there. That is our three priorities. Obviously, the first, sustainability, pretty much entirely within our control. We're on it. The second, expand student opportunity. Have a genuine kind of watershed moment with significant one-time investment to really amplify the work that we're already doing, take it to the next level in terms of student retention. But the real problem that Pennsylvania faces, and Pennsylvania state system is simply a part of that problem, is ultimately one having to do with the price that students are being asked to pay for their education. We're pricing too many people out of the higher education that they need, that Pennsylvania needs them to have in order to keep the lights on in the economy. That one we can't solve, not without help. So, Randy, let me draw a line there, Madam Chair. Any further discussion or questions or comment?
Dan, could you go back to that last slide? The second bullet, which is the main point. As we near peak efficiency, there is little more we can do given the scale of the affordability challenge that pushes into the $300 million a year range simply to hit national and regional averages. What generally are the numbers behind that? And what does this actually mean in terms, this isn't saying necessarily that an appropriation per se needs to rise by this amount, but that somehow together, using some combination of methodologies, we need to be able to effectuate this.
So I was really, these are national and regional averages in terms of net cost of attendance. And I was just using these to give us a sense of the scale of the problem that we're facing. And you'll see that when we get into the appropriations request, we'll come back to some of these benchmarks. But this was not intended as a target or a ceiling or.
Okay. I just want to clarify.
Really yeah, I mean, and it goes back to the earlier, but look, and again, these are policy choices. When you're 46 in the nation in terms of your investment in public four-year education, this is what happens. And I mean, over years, this is what happens. You just fall further and further and further behind.
You're just gonna see challenges like this. Just to give a sense of the scale. Okay, thank you. Okay, other questions or comments?
I see no hands in the room right now or on Zoom, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. Randy, at this point, we have this, as some, I think, pretty potent background. Do we want to move into the University Success Committee? Or
let's take a 10-minute break just so we can, because the next session will probably be a long one. Give folks a chance to.
All right. So everyone go get a cup of coffee or whatever, and we will reconvene.
10:30.
Basically at 10:30. Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chair, if you want to check your microphone, see if your audio is good,
Can you hear me?
loud and clear.
Very good. Are we reconvened?
We are ready here.
Terrific. All right, let's get started again. We are now going to move into the University Success Committee meeting. As we do, let me just reiterate what we talked about yesterday, which is that committee members only vote during committee sessions, but we encourage all board members to engage in the dialogue and discussion. And this is going to be an important University Success Committee meeting. So I emphasize that. And then the full board will take action on the recommendations of the committees later this morning. So with that, I would turn the gavel over to Chair Larry Skinner to moderate the University Success Committee meeting. Larry, are you ready?
I am ready.
There you are. Terrific.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make sure that I'm all set up here.
Okay. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I will ask Sharissa to do a roll call of the University Success Committee.
Yes, good morning. Governor Skinner.
Here.
Governor Weaver. Governor Weaver. Governor Gindelsberger.
Here.
Designee Tara Williams.
Here.
Representative Roy.
Here.
Governor Roberts.
Here.
Governor Yeomans.
Here.
And Chair Shapiro.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 items for consideration by the University Success Committee today, beginning on page 27 of the agenda. Both of these items, approval of the system's appropriation requests and 5-year capital spending plan, come before the board each year at this time and are required as part of the Commonwealth funding allocation processes. The first item is approval of the E&G appropriation requests. Last year at this time, the committee discussed the changes that were occurring in the system's budget processes based on system redesign. As the Chancellor noted in his presentation, as part of last year's comprehensive planning process, known as the CPP, universities were to submit financial projections to support programs, goals, and sustainability. Last year, all universities were projecting the ability to meet the goals of balancing and aligning employee ratios by June 30th, 2022. First, I want to thank the universities for everything they have been doing. Universities have been managing through the pandemic with frozen tuition while also providing increased institutional aid to help student affordability. They have been reorganizing in small and large ways to address the financial challenges, all while the appropriation and tuition has been held flat. As the Chancellor mentioned, through the CPP review process and in consultation with the ELG, due to enrollment declines, he is directing universities to look specifically at low enrolled programs over the course of the next few months to better position universities for the start of next year's planning cycle. The materials provided on pages 27 to 40 have been developed through this year's CPP to support the ongoing educational and general operations of state system universities. We normally approve the current year, fiscal year 21-22 operating budgets and approve the system's appropriation requests for next fiscal year. We know we are not in normal times. In the projections in your board materials, you will note that universities are planning for a modest appropriation increase to be financially responsible. However, the appropriation request action before us is one which helps move the system to a more sustainability position. The universities have worked diligently under sustainability over the past 2 fiscal years to serve students while addressing workforce and operating expenditure adjustments, integrations, and increased resource sharing. The scope, scale, and pace of these changes have placed a significant burden on our employees, faculty, and staff, It is time to think differently about our funding requests and what that means to the students and communities that we serve. The request before us is about the long-term stability of the system and its role serving Pennsylvania students and communities. I would like to turn it over to Molly to walk us through the budget and appropriations request discussion.
Thank you, Chair Skinner. With respect to this action surrounding the fiscal 22 budget and the 23 appropriations, I'll first provide some high-level information surrounding that 22 budget and then an overview of the 23 appropriation request. Our action today contains three components. The first is that standard approval of the current year's annual budgets. The second is the appropriation request for fiscal 22-23. And finally, the third item is for continued advocacy for increases from the Commonwealth for direct support to students and university debt relief, which you'll hear further about from the Chancellor and myself. As Chair Skinner mentioned, the universities have worked diligently pursuing their financial sustainability goals over the past 2 fiscal years. This work has had them serving students' needs while at the same time addressing workforce and operating expenditure adjustments, along with taking on integrations and resource sharing. They've done so in an environment of flat state appropriation and tuition, all while increasing their aid to support students. Turning to the first component of our action today, the budgetary information provided in pages 28 through 35 reflects the education in general, or E&G budget, which is the primary component of the budget, encompassing the academic mission, and that stands at $1.6 billion. Fiscal 22 revenue is reflective of the combination of the system's work addressing affordability by freezing tuition, as well as the decline that the universities are experiencing in their fall 21 enrollments. These two factors have resulted in tuition revenue being 4.5% lower than the prior year. The personnel expenses have been a large area of focus for our universities, as you've heard updates about this throughout our meeting regarding the significant steps that they're taking with their workforce planning. Aided in part by retirement incentive programs, the personnel costs are once again down by 2.4% compared to the prior year. This is all while incurring pay rate and benefit rate increases. Non-personnel expenses are up year over year by about 25%. That is as they return to levels comparable to the pre-pandemic timeframes. Again, this is driven primarily through that resumption of normal campus operations, where such items as utilities, services, and supplies are closer to those historical levels, along with the inclusion of continued COVID mitigation as universities continue to respond to the pandemic requirements. And within these projections, the COVID aid assistance is largely offset by associated COVID-related expenses. I would like to note that the future years projected E&G budgets do illustrate this impact that we've been speaking about that this year's enrollment has on out years revenue. And as also noted earlier by the Chancellor, the universities do now have some targeted investment dollars as one-time funds to help them address enrollment as well, although those impacts are not yet incorporated in these projections. Additionally, universities will continue to focus on sustainability efforts to address the alignment of their expenses. Next slide, Randy. So the work conducted since October 2019 related to sustainability has begun to transition universities. No one could have predicted the pandemic and its longer-term impacts. Thus, when turning to the 23 appropriation requests, as Chair Skinner mentioned, we are seeking a more comprehensive consideration of our needs as a system. Universities have been following financial sustainability guidance during a challenging environment that included the pandemic, price freezes, and appropriation freezes. Universities have taken and plan to continue to take the steps necessary to realign their finances and move towards greater financial sustainability. Therefore, the second component for consideration, the request, is built upon reliable and realistic budget information reflective of our university's significant and ongoing efforts to improve their financial sustainability. The request addresses three key areas, the first being able to avoid a fiscal 23 tuition increase, as well as address normal inflationary costs. The second element is to restore universities' appropriated funds through our approved formula, which we took steps towards doing in July, but that required us to leverage one-time funding. The request should allow us to fully allocate appropriated funds while preserving those one-time funds for our strategic needs. Third, the request should provide additional funds to assist universities with their work around addressing affordability through providing the capacity to increase institutional aid. These are investments our universities have been steadily making, as you've heard about today, despite these difficult financial circumstances. Page 36 provides estimates of these items that I reviewed, but we are looking to have the appropriation address and formulate the basis of our proposed requests of $550 million. Lastly, and the third part of the motion for the board's consideration is the endorsement of our continued advocacy for two key areas: increases from the Commonwealth for direct support to students and for university debt relief. Next slide, Randy. In terms of direct to student support, I'm going to turn it over to the Chancellor to make some remarks in this area.
Thanks, Molly. Actually, Randy, just go back one slide if you can. I just wanted to put some additional context. So it's really interesting. Since I've been here, we've been asked, I think, frequently, what's it really cost to run the system? And I think I've been asked that in both chambers by both caucuses and by the administration. And it was a really difficult question to ask because we didn't really have our arms around cost and expenditure, and it's taken us, quite a bit of time. And I want to shout out to the CFOs, the chief financial officers, and the chief academic officers, and the presidents, and obviously, my team, Molly and Sharon. Molly Mercer and Sharon Minnick for really doing the heavy lifting to get us where we are, which is a place where we can say, hand on heart and backing up the numbers, making all these assumptions, yet we're going to operate sustainably. Okay, we're going to, operate balanced budget within, reasonable headcounts that align with our enrollment, and do all the things we need to do, for our students. What does it cost to operate? So assuming we're operating sustainably, assuming that we're not doing any cross subsidies, here's the number. And we can show you the math, and more than happy to do that. So, but it's also responsive to the greater workforce need. And I want to move to the direct to student funding slide, because the research, and I want to again shout out to the State Higher Education Executive Officers Group, SHIOs, not an acronym, I'm sure that's on everybody's tongue, but they do some fantastic reporting, and they have a May 2021 report, which is a meta-analysis, a review of 81 research studies on the relationship between institutional funding and student enrollment and student outcomes. And there's also a research and evidence base on the relationship between cost of an education and enrollment and outcomes. So we built a little model, and we asked ourselves the question that I led with: what if the Pennsylvania state system were to do its part in meeting the state's workforce development goals? Remember, it was, I'm not going to remember, it was 1,200 masters and 2,000 bachelors annually from now to 2030. So based on the research, what kind of bump are we going to get in our credentialing productivity? That's a term of art, and the number of students that we're able to graduate with degrees, on the basis of $550 million. Well, based on the research, appropriations increased to $550 million would give us about 40%, 2/5 of what we need. Based on the research, which shows for every additional X amount of dollars in direct institutional support, you can expect to see Y increase in credentialing productivity. So then we said, okay, what's the delta? What's the difference? The difference is about 60%. So we went back to the research and we said, okay, how much would it need to cost our students on average to produce that, to fill that gap? How much would it cost? And so we went into the research, which shows for every X amount reduction in net price of attendance, you can expect in a public university to see Y of an increase credentialing productivity. It's a simple analytical model. It's not going to probably win any Nobel Prizes, much to my disappointment. I'm sure Dr. Akers will also be disappointed, but it's directionally on track. And so the proposal is to seek in general fund appropriation the $550 million that it costs to run this system operating at or near peak efficiency, and additional funds flowing directly to students at $200 million a year. And then to go back to the benchmark at this level, it would move Pennsylvania from 46 in the nation in terms of its investment in public four-year universities, public state-owned universities. It would move us to about average. And I want to talk a little bit about, and we have been intentionally unspecific about how funds would be allocated, because how funds are allocated would really be determined by what goals we wanted to set. So we're conscious of three goals. Equity. The biggest burden financially falls on students with lesser means. Today, a middle income family is paying about $45,000, 45% of its household income to send one kid to college for 1 year, which is why we're seeing decline in college participation rate. So equity is a driver. And as we said before, it's mathematically improbable that Pennsylvania can meet its workforce development goals without doing better by student groups who've been underserved historically, including low-income students, rural students, underrepresented minorities and adults. So equity is a goal. Workforce development is a goal. And if you were to use direct student funding to achieve an equity goal, it would be invested disproportionately in historically underserved students and lower income students. Another goal is, of course, workforce development. We need to fill the jobs that are starving for the talent that they need. So if we were to pursue that goal, it would entail investing in students who were pursuing programs of study that are known to align with high demand occupations. And we know what those occupations are, and we know which of our programs align with them, and we know very confidently how many of our students who go through our programs land in those occupational areas anyway. And a further goal is taxpayer efficiency. And we talked a little bit about that. I talked a little bit about that earlier, right? It is a very efficient use of taxpayer dollars to make a marginal additional investment in a student who has already benefited from public high school or public community college. So if we were pursuing an efficiency goal, we'd invest disproportionately in dual enrollment programs and community college transfer. So I wanted to say specifically, the invitation or the request that we're making, proposing to do this via letter to the governor and the General Assembly, is really inviting a discussion to gain stakeholder input into these three areas. I do want to call out, in case someone wanted to ask me for my point of view, I do have one, that there is significant investment in the dual enrollment and community college transfer options, not only introduces efficiency, but because it's a source of typically more low income students, it does double duty around equity. And of course, workforce development is a matter of coaching and advising and encouraging students into occupations into programs of study where they feel strong and confident and interested, of course, but also being clear about what the career prospects are. Anyway, I wanted to get that out there. So that is the direct to student funding. We have been, again, intentionally agnostic about the specifics of implementation, because implementation really requires alignment around specific goals. But we're pretty clear on the math that the appropriations increase, investment in the institution will yield, according to the research, a certain improvement in our credentialing productivity. Getting the rest of the way requires that additional investment, again, according to the research. Molly, should I turn back to you for the next?
Sure. And the last slide really focuses on that second key priority area, which is housing debt relief of between 30 and 40 million. Universities that have been experiencing year-over-year enrollment declines, and in particular, those located in rural communities, have certainly had a challenge in supporting their residence hall debt payments. Relief of, on an annual basis, between 30 and 40 million would provide a critical infusion of funds that would give these institutions an opportunity to create a sustainable path forward financially. While, as the Chancellor said, not part of a general appropriations request, these two priority areas are of highest importance in fulfilling our mission. These advocacy efforts are recommended on behalf of our students, both current and prospective, to start to provide them with a more affordable net education price point, as well as for our system's future financial sustainability. Thank you, and Chair Skinner, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Molly and Dan. Based on the information that was shared with us, first as outlined on page 27, I move that the committee recommend that the Board of Governors approve the fiscal year 2021-22 E&G annual operating budgets for state system universities and Office of the Chancellor, reflected in attachment 1, beginning on page 28. And the fiscal year 2022-23 E&G appropriation request of $550 million, and continued advocacy for increases from the Commonwealth for direct support to students and for university debt relief. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Before we take a vote on the three items before us at a single action, would any committee member like to separate the items and vote for each of them individually? Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I'll share the motion on the screen so that everyone can see it.
I was just going to ask you to do that, Randy. Thank you.
Just 1 second.
Thank you, Randy.
Right, you should be able to see it now.
Okay, moving forward, committee members, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The second and final item on our committee agenda is the approval of the capital spending plan as presented beginning on page 41 of the materials. Annually, the board reviews the 5-year capital spending plan, but approves only the current year of the plan. The attached plan reflects continuity with last year's 5-year planning period. The plan assumes continuation of a $70 million annual allocation of Commonwealth capital appropriations from the governor. All projects in this plan are addressing significant current needs and are necessary regardless of potential future integrations. I would like to turn it back to Molly to review this item.
Thank you. The fiscal 21-22 capital plan is for $70 million that the state system is receiving in capital funding this current year, with the additional 4 years provided for reference encompassing a 5-year view. All projects identified for the fiscal 21-22 approval have been approved by the General Assembly, and they are important projects that steward and replenish our Commonwealth-owned facilities. In addition, projects associated with the 6 integrating universities were reevaluated in light of the plans to integrate and determined that they are still essential to the instruction and operations of these respective locations. For fiscal 22, the largest project is the California University Science Building at $39.2 million. Design was funded in a prior year, and the project will replace 2 outdated, inefficient buildings in poor condition, with one smaller, more efficient and modernized building. The overall project includes demolition of these two buildings, and savings will be associated with that reduction in the physical footprint. The Cal U Science Building is part of the overall Western Integration Academic Plan and is very important to support the science offerings at Cal U. The 22 plan also provides an additional $20 million to Westchester University for their Stursbecker Health Science Center. The additional funding will allow them to support the final completion of this facility and address key life cycle renovation requirements and allow them to upgrade their energy systems within the building. Uses of this building include health sciences, sports medicine, anatomy, and athletics. Then we have two utility infrastructure projects. One is at Cal U. They have $2 million going towards a boiler upgrade. And the second is at IUP. $7 million is planned for utilities infrastructure. Both projects are critical to keeping the campus infrastructure operational. And lastly, IUP is receiving funds for a demolition for currently vacated buildings. In addition to the $70 million that I'm speaking about, we did receive $11 million in DGS capital for debt relief, and we're in current conversations with DGS regarding the next steps with those funds. As those funds are not part of the 5-year capital master plan, those are not included in today's motion. That concludes my remarks and updates on the capital plan. Turning it back to you, Chair Skinner.
Thanks again, Molly. Based on the information that was just shared with us, first, as outlined on page 41, I move that the committee recommend that the Board of Governors approve the fiscal year 2021-22 capital spending plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just hold on one second. We were waiting for one other member to join. There's a. Okay, you can proceed, Mr. Chairman.
Committee members, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that concludes the work of the University Success Committee.
Okay. Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you everyone on the committee for excellent committee work. And thank you, Molly.
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just real quick, Mr. Chairman, if you could, on that vote, you forgot to ask if there were any opposed.
Oops.
Oh, my apologies.
Yes.
Are there any opposed? All in favor, vote aye.
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 That now concludes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Glad that worked out. But thank you again, Chairman Skinner and everybody for that work, and Molly for an excellent presentation and really good attachments as well. Very clear. All right, we're going to consider now ratification of committees, plural, actions over the past 2 days. I think we're going to separate out the appropriations motion. Generally we consider them all together, but why don't we start with the Student Success Committee? And I think we'll take them separately. Randy, is that okay in terms of
that'd be fine.
Robert's rules to do it that way? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So refresh your memory to the full board that the Student Success Committee recommended that we adopt item 10A, which are the revisions to the general education policy as recommended. Do I have, I'll put that forward as a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay.
Allow board members, if you're on Zoom, if you have a question or comment, raise your hand. There are no hands in the room, Madam Chair, and there are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, all right. Then I'll call for the vote, voice vote first. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed?
And
Okay,
there
the
are
motion,
no hands raised or voices here either, Madam Chair.
they're not. Okay, thank you. Thank you for slowing me down. All right, the motion is approved. And now we'll go on to item 14A, which are the E&G budgets appropriations request. And we are going to, Randy, are you recommending that we can do these together, or did you want to separate out the actual appropriations request itself?
Why don't you do them individually? That'll just be easier.
All right, we'll do them individually, recognizing that we'll do them individually for the sake of clarity and transparency, and to allow everybody a chance, to reflect on pieces of this, but recognizing that these really are a package. It's a little bit different from the way we generally do this, but we feel it actually more closely reflects the actual needs and the analysis that has been done to bring us to the point of making these requests. So I just want to thank everybody again for doing that, doing this in a very data-driven way. I think this is much better. So the first item under 14A is approval of the fiscal year 2021-22 E&G annual operating budgets for the state system, universities, and the Office of the Chancellor, reflected in attachment 1. Did I have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
And just wait to see if there are any hands raised.
Mhm.
None in the room. And I see no hands raised on Zoom, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
There are no hands raised.
None on Zoom either.
Correct.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we'll consider sub-item 2, which is the fiscal year 2022-23 E&G appropriation request of $550 million. Put that forth as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Any discussion or questions?
There's a hand raised, Representative Briggs.
Thank you very much. And I was going to ask this during the committee meeting, but
I how's the chair.
I can answer.
Oh, it doesn't have a cushion?
Excuse me, could you mute on Zoom so we can hear Representative Briggs?
And I appreciate the committee for bringing this to our recommendation. The $550 million for the operating, under the $470 million that you had said earlier today, or possibly yesterday afternoon, there was $100 million of student aid in that. Will that remain in this, even though we will be taking a second action? I mean, that we're increasing that even more.
Correct. And Molly, can you tell us, it will remain, I want to ask Molly to let us know if it's going to go up, because I think it's going to go up. Okay.
Yes, it'll remain and it'll provide capacity for it to go up.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you, Representative Briggs.
And Senator Martin has his hand up.
Okay, Senator Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On 2 and 3, I'm just going to say I'm going to abstain from voting on these, as I feel as we get into this process and how the money is going to end up being distributed, being part of those conversations through the accountability hearings as chair of the Senate Education Committee and serving on Appropriations Committee, I think a lot of discussion is going to surround that fact. So I will be abstaining from 2 and 3 for now. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, the General Counsel has a weigh in.
Senator Martin, this is Andy Lehman. Are you declaring a conflict of interest?
Yeah, that's how I'm hearing it.
It's required.
He's nodding affirmative.
Yeah, okay, that's how I heard it too. That makes sense. Are we good with that, Andy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any other questions or comments on sub-item 2 under 14A?
Looking for hands in Zoom. I see no hands in Zoom. And looking for hands in the room. I see no hands in the room.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, and we have one abstention.
Correct.
Okay, so we can move on, Andy. We don't need to do a roll call with an abstention.
That is correct. He by voice acclamation, he indicated his abstention.
Okay, thank you. So now we're considering sub-item 3 under 14A, which is continued advocacy for increases from the Commonwealth for direct support to students and for university debt relief. I'll put that forward as a motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion or question or comments?
We'll just pause to see if there's any raised hands on Zoom or in the room. Madam Chair, we have Senator Schwank and then Representative Briggs.
Okay, Senator Schwank.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So on this advocacy for university debt relief, is that indicating that we are, that's not necessarily incorporated into our capital request? The debt relief is not there in that 450 million?
Correct. So the capital request is for our standard master planning around our education and general facilities. So that's aligned with the 70 million that we are allocated. So this would be seeking something additional to that.
So it's not incorporated in the E&G budget and it's not incorporated in capital. So yes, definitely advocacy will be necessary if we need to address this. Thank you.
That's exactly the point. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Representative Briggs.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks Senator Schwank for highlighting that. I mean, we have spent a lot of time talking about the need to for the Commonwealth to help address our debt. But I'm supporting this absolutely because of the direct support to students. We need to do whatever we can as a Commonwealth to assist them with the I think uncompetitive level of tuition that we've been forced to put on them. So I will do everything I can with the General Assembly and my colleagues to aid for this, and hoping it is passed unanimously with one abstention. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Briggs. Any other comments, questions, or discussion?
There are no hands in the room, and there are no hands raised in Zoom, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you then. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
There are no hands raised in Zoom or in the room.
Thank you. Passes with one abstention again. Thank you all very much. Now we're going to go on to item 14B, I believe. Are we going to put that up, Randy?
Yes, I just slide that there.
Okay.
Sorry.
And this is with regard to the capital spending plan.
There we go.
Okay. All right, I will put forward this motion that the Board of Governors approve the fiscal year 2021 to 22 capital spending plan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
Representative Roy has his hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Roy.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to point out, I will be voting yes on this, but I would like to encourage that we take a very, 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 very close look at all capital spending. at this point where the system is in such financial trouble, I'm not saying all construction projects are bad. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be building anything, but we just really, really need to focus on making sure that something is absolutely essential before we spend the money on building it or adding an addition or renovating it or anything like that. The most important thing to our students is having good professors in the front of the classroom and having adequate facilities. You obviously need classroom buildings, light, heat, water, all the basics. We don't need Taj Mahals, but we don't want squalid conditions either. But we just have to make sure that we're not, doing things that we don't really need to do. That since I've been on the board, there's been, 3 or 4 situations where some of the capital spending didn't seem to make sense. Buildings that were going to get torn down, it was decided that we were going to save the buildings after all. And buildings that had been there for 100 years, now they need remodeled, but they didn't need remodeled in the first 99 years. And again, I'm not saying that all progress is bad. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that as perilous as our financial condition is, we just need to be, really, really, really careful. If you look back over the last 5 or 10 years, a lot of the construction projects, athletic facilities, arenas, building, dorms, things that didn't really need done to the extent that they were done. You can't do anything about stuff that already happened. But I just really think that we should even, focus even more, just really, really, really making sure that something needs to be done before we actually do it. And if we could cut back a little bit on capital spending and see if more funding could be available just on our regular funding rather than construction funding, that might help our students more. If we cut back on building stuff and just use that money for normal operations instead. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Roy. You're making an excellent point. When you look at the schedule, even the capital schedule, that is even pretty far out, most of it is renovation oriented, deferred maintenance oriented, infrastructure, utilities, that sort of thing. But your point is very well taken, and we definitely should take a look at least some of these that are on the schedule, and assess whether or not if it's truly more like new building, how does that weigh in the cost benefit analysis, or are there other ways to approach it rather than, what is planned, et cetera. So we will be doing that analysis, and I thank you for bringing that up. And did anybody else want to comment on this? Or Dan, did you have anything you wanted to jump in on with this?
Sorry, Madam Chair. No, I actually welcome the comment from Representative Roy, Governor Roy, and will ask the team to do exactly as he suggested, working with the on the campuses. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that it might be interesting, maybe when we're prepared to, have a workshop segment on that and really go over it with the board. Okay, any other comments, questions, or discussion before I move this to vote?
There are no other hands raised in Zoom, and there are no other hands raised in the room.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
There are no hands raised here or on Zoom.
All right, very good. All right, the motion carries, and I think that concludes the business of those action items from the two committees, Student Success and University Success. Okay, next we will hear an update on university integrations, the work that's being undertaken in the West and in the Northeast. So as you know, the state system also provides a quarterly update to the General Assembly regarding 19 different factors on which we have to report. And today we're going to hear some of the highlights of what will be in that report. So for that, may I turn it over to Sharon?
That helps.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I just want to go through a quick update on the highlights from the July quarterly report. So in the July plan that was presented, we had outlined several items that were the milestones for the first quarter of the implementation plan. And those milestones were around several areas. On the academic side, it was to develop the phased-in plan for the curriculum development. That plan is on track for both integrations. The side letters were completed, and so the work process is starting. As it relates to the phase-in academic plans or phase-in curriculum plan, that has impacts downstream on student support services and IT. Those changes to both plans are seen in the reports that were transmitted, so you can see how that curriculum plan development and the phase-in impacted other areas and switched to times so that it's aligned better to the academic schedule. The biggest thing that had to be completed was the middle state submission that was submitted for both on September 16th. That was a large work effort for the integration teams, and a big thank you to everyone who participated in pulling those documents together. It was a big lift, and the team should be commended for the work that they did to achieve that milestone. On the organization design, the organization charts at the division level were due to be completed by the end of the first quarter. They were completed and transmitted outbound to employees for both integrations on schedule. And then the last item that was a major item was marketing and branding. It was completed in the West, and you will hear the update. The Northeast is still in process with their analysis, and that will be forthcoming. So those were the major items that we were tracking for this first quarter. So everything is tracking according to plan. And I think I will turn it over to Dan because the other area that we were working on was governance.
Thank you so much. So just a quick overview here of developments around leadership and governance. So we're defining a transition period to be the period of our financial projections, which they were 5-year financial projections. And so we expect, and we will expect to see various aspects of the integration take place over that timeline. It won't happen all at once. In July, which is the transaction date, July 2022, that we're looking at, it won't happen all at once with a big bang in the fall of the first cohort of students. But over that period of time, different aspects of the integration will be accomplished. So I wanted to focus here specifically on the leadership aspects. So let me begin at the bottom of the councils of trustees. So we're working closely with the heads, the leaders of the council of trustees in the 6 universities to come up with a means by which all will be effectively represented in the workings of the integrated entity. This is something which the leadership and governance committees work very hard on in the planning process, developing a variety of different options, but all of them, you know, with some slight variation, really trying to accomplish the same kind of thing, which was to ensure that there is appropriate representation from each of the regions in the governance and oversight of the newly integrated entity, and frankly, so that the students' voices from the integrating schools could also be effectively heard. So we'll continue to work with our Council of Trustee leadership in this regard, and look forward to reporting back. There, we're anticipating that there will be a transitional arrangement in place at the effective date of the transaction, which is July 2022. So we have time, but not that much time to come up with that transitional arrangement. I'm very confident that we will do that. Let me talk a little bit about the interim presidents. Obviously, this is a significant task. And I want to give a shout out to President Hanna and to President Pearson for the enormity of the tasks that they're undertaking. I'm not sure any of us really comprehended exactly how challenging it would be. And I want to just give a shout out to their apparently irrepressible energy and creativity and thoughtfulness that they're bringing to this really very considerable transformative effort. In effect, they are really redefining what a president will be, because I think what we're learning, and I think what we always expected, was that a president of 3 very vibrant campus communities is probably going to look and behave a little bit differently than a president who is entirely associated with 1. And so we're working very closely with them and them with their councils and communities to hammer out what that means. And that's an ongoing process, but it's also one that's going to take time. And we expect it to take the full time of that 5-year transitional period. So rather than intervening in the midst of a protracted transformation with the disruption of a presidential search, I'm going to I will not be bringing a search for a permanent president forward until that full transition is effected. I wanted just to add that obviously as interim presidents, President Hanna and President Pearson are surrounded by the full support that we offer in terms of supporting them in their new roles, but also as we do with all presidents and all leadership, including the chancellor, a full range of accountabilities and performance management structures. But we would anticipate that we would give them the runway that they need to do the job that we've asked them to do, which is a very considerable effort. So I wanted to just talk, so that transition will be quite a long one. With respect of the university cabinets, and we're going to get to that in a minute on a couple of slides, that transition we'll see very quickly. That we obviously need people in place to manage the university, just as the presidents have a period of 4.5 of years or so, 5 years to integrate their universities. They're going to need a team who is dedicated directly to right now, not just managing the 3 universities, but also the evolving integrated entity. And at the time the integrated entity materializes in July again, 2022, to take over that at the helm of that entity. So we're already beginning to see the identification of those who emerge as members of the president's cabinet from the effective date of July 2022. So very short transition for the cabinet, longer one for the presidents and the council of trustees. Any questions either on either of these aspects? Otherwise, there's a few other, there we go, updates. Do you want to take this one, Sharon? Back to you.
The next 2 slides, just at a really high level, show the new cabinets that were rolled out for both regions. I'm not going to kind of read through the structures because you're probably very familiar with the structures of a university, so they look familiar to you, but you can obviously notice, one of the things that we were looking at was where we could find efficiencies and how to share those structures. And so what you see is the new universities cabinet for the Northeast. And then the next slide will go into the new universities cabinet for the West. Again, both of these structures have been rolled out to the university committee or communities. And so the employees are aware of what the new cabinet looks like, and the individuals, if they have named individuals that would be assuming these roles effective with the July timeframe. And then I believe, Randy, I would like to turn it over to Dale to do their probably the big announcement of the morning.
Can I just put a gloss on that? So there's quite a bit of, obviously a lot going on in not just in the West, but in the Northeast. And so a shout out, not just to the presidents, but to their teams and to the faculty, staff, and students. I know they're engaging actively in all quarters on all aspects. But, when we come to think about it, kind of a new look and a new name, it's so super exciting. And the energy is just effervescent around this. So, President Pearson, thank you for leading this charge and bringing us to what is really a very exciting, tremendously exciting moment. So over to you.
I would just add before we go to you, Dale, that this is the last item on our agenda today, and I'm delighted that we're that we're doing it last because it's really exciting. So please go ahead, take the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you to everybody for all of your support as we are been moving through this process. Thank you to the leadership team and all the employees who've been, and students, and all of our constituents have been working in the Western region to bring this forward. And my special thanks to my partner, Bashar Hanna, who we meet weekly and we discuss all issues related to integration. And we know that no one else in the world is in our shoes. And so special thanks, Bashar. Naming has been a thoughtful and data-driven process that began by listening to our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni, our trustees, and multiple stakeholders from all 3 campuses and regions. We use surveys, workshops, focus groups to gather input and identify a small number of options for the new name. When we worked with a professional partner to conduct internet research, we wanted to discover which of these options would perform best online. We know that most students start their search for college online. So a search engine analysis was very important and critical to our process. We looked at historical names and competitors' names to make sure our new name would be distinctive, easy to remember, and not be a conflict. And finally, we conducted market research to make sure that our choice was appealing to students, to families throughout the region and throughout, of course, the Commonwealth. The sample included participants across Pennsylvania, including current students and family members and influencers of college-aged children. The overall size of the sample, 300, gave us a strong confidence level, and that the results were representative of a larger population to the whole. One name stood out amongst the rest. And now, Randy, I think it would be nice if you could show something. I think we have something.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. The name is Pennsylvania Western University, and the campus's names will stand out and be unique. Pennsylvania Western University, California, Pennsylvania Western University, Clarion, Pennsylvania Western University, Edinburgh, and Pennsylvania Western University Global Online. So Penn West U, go. These are the branding, the students. This will roll out this afternoon. The name has been selected, but the students will participate in a vote to choose the branding process, what they will have on their, as the students call it, their merchandise, what will they wear on their t-shirts, and all the things that really resonate with them that are so important. They will get to choose that, and the information is being sent out this afternoon with the details of how the colors, how the logos were selected, and the historical perspective of how we came to blend and put things together for Pennsylvania Western University. It speaks of the hardy region we all serve. It is a strong state name, and it is a state university, and that's what we are. So thank you. I would hope that you would affirm this and that you would give us approval to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Person. That's so exciting. Randy, did you, were you?
Yes, Senator Schwank has her hand up.
Please, Senator Schwank.
This is very exciting. Thank you, Dr. Pearson. I'm madly trying to write down the notes. Can you repeat for me the names of the individual institutions so that I can get that straight? I'm reporting, I want to report that to my colleagues later. So
Very easy. Penn West, California, Penn West Clarion, Penn West Edinburgh, Penn West Online.
So it's Penn West at,
Pennsylvania Western University. No at, well, it is at, but Pennsylvania Western University at California, Clarion, Edinburgh, and online. And we will send that information out to the board members so that you have the details of that. We have a detailed information we can share with you.
can you send us the clip that we saw here
We
too?
will send this short one and we will send you the long one, which really has a lot of the history and information that you can share with your constituents.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that. On Zoom, it just sort of went by very quickly. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to watching it really unfold.
We will send you that link.
Thank you. And Senator Schwank, also to your question, when we get to the motion, we'll have the formal name as well. Other comments or anything else before I put forward a motion?
There are no hands in the room and no hands on Zoom, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right. Well, this is a very exciting moment. We now sort of start to see things actually happening. I mean, it's really, really exciting and a great day for the system. And thank you for all of that fine work that went into that. Of course, Act 188 requires the legal name that will be reflected in our official motion, which I'm about to put forward. And so, we will notice Pennsylvania Western University, and then adding the 3 sites. But for the purposes of a motion, I'm going to put forward, I move that the Board of Governors approves the name Pennsylvania Western University of Pennsylvania of the State System of Higher Education for the institution resulting from the Western integration to be effective July 1st, 2022, the proposed effective date of the integration, pending approval by the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Randy, are you able to put that up? If not, I'm happy to repeat it, but may I have a second?
Second.
Okay, the awkward legal name notwithstanding, are there any questions, any discussion?
And by the way, Madam Chair, all of our universities have these same weird legal awkward names in law.
Which I don't think I actually realized, but okay.
We did.
There are no hands raised here, Madam Chair, and there's one question, Representative Roy on Zoom.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I know the answer, but the sign out front would just say Pennsylvania Western University, and then hopefully in larger print, Edinburgh underneath that, Pennsylvania Western University, Clarion, and so on. I hope the whole Pennsylvania of the State System of Higher Education, that would be pretty cluttered if that was on t-shirts and that was on signs.
To answer, if I might answer the question, Chair Shapiro.
Please do.
We intend to keep Edinburgh very large, and we intend to keep the new name blending with Edinburgh. So we have no major plans to change major signs at this point because it's expensive. But we will make sure that the Edinburgh, the Cal, and Clarion are strong. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, I'm no expert at this stuff, but it seems like the word Edinburgh should be larger print than the words Pennsylvania Western University. Same thing with California and Clarion. So thank you.
And that's what the students have also said that they would like. So we're good with that. Thank you.
And Governor Weaver has his hand up.
Madam Chair, I just want to take a moment and thank Dale and the team and the group and say congratulations. This was a lot of hard work. A lot went into this, including the students. So congratulations on that.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Governor Weaver. I appreciate that remark too. Okay, any other?
Senator Schwank has her hand up.
Oh, okay, Senator Schwank.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So we may not be there yet, but one of the big questions that came up was the issue of the athletic teams at the different campuses. Do we know yet what that's going to look like, or is the committee continuing to work on this?
I think I'm going to defer to my colleague Bashar, but the committee is continuing to work on this and progress is good, but he can give you the definitive.
Yeah, thank you, Dale, and thank you for your kind words earlier. Senator Schwenk, we have been in constant communication with the NCAA from day one. They asked many questions. We provided answers. They asked for a certain organizational chart to ensure that every campus will have an athletic director that will oversee the athletics on each of our 6 campuses. We have answered all their questions in writing. We are now waiting for Middle States and the Federal Department of Education to give us the green light. Once we, once we get the green light from the Middle States Commission and the Federal Department of Education, we envision continuing the process with the NCAA, and we continue to be optimistic that all 6 campuses will retain their athletic programs.
That's great. I assume that would be the case. I guess I'm asking about the name, but I think the answer is to be determined, likely, I think what you're saying to me. But I too want to commend you for asking these kinds of questions. You understand the amount of work that had to go into making this happen. We talked briefly in a workshop about the issue of making sure that we didn't infringe on any copyrights or something of that nature too. This is more complicated than it looks, and it's really important in terms of making sure that integration is something that the public accepts too, right? So I commend you for the work that you've done. Thank you.
I could just add one comment about the branding of the athletics. When the students get to vote this next few weeks we've made sure that the Golden Eagle, the Fighting Scot, and also our Vulcans are intact, they can see it and how it will work with the new branding and the logo. So students will see where the logos fit. Those names will not change. Those names will remain true. And then there will be the new name. I would like to give kudos to the design team on all 3 campuses. They came together. They did not tell us who was putting in what design. They integrated all of the work and came up with the various designs, and were very careful about keeping it anonymous so we didn't know who did what. They worked together in unison and the product was outstanding. So kudos to the design team as well and everyone who worked on these committees. And I believe several of the Board of Governors worked on these committees too as well. Kudos, shout out to Alex and Neil.
Thank you.
There are no more hands raised here or in Zoom, Madam Chair.
All right, terrific. Thank you. And thank you, Alex, as well. All right. Great way to end our meeting. Let me ask if there are any other matters to come before.
And Madam Chair,
you know what? We haven't done the vote, have we? I got so excited. Are there any other comments or questions before I do put it to a vote?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
There are no hands raised.
All right, the motion carries. There we go. Pennsylvania Western University. Again, obviously, I'm very excited about this, which is why I completely forgot to actually, get the motion approved. But at this point, let me ask if there are any other matters to come before the board. Yes.
Hi, Cindy. I wanted to just make a quick statement. I get a publication every day called City and State First Read, and they just highlighted city and state individuals that they thought were first class in terms of the achievements that they've done that are over 50. And I just want to congratulate you for your name being part of that list.
Oh, you have succeeded in completely embarrassing me, but thank you so much, Larry. And, I don't understand it. I'm 32 years old. I have no idea why they included me in a 50 over 50 list, but what am I going to do?
I thought the same thing.
Thank you very much.
You're
That's very,
welcome.
very kind of you. Okay, hearing no new business except for that, the meeting is now adjourned and